It's another math day with you here with teacher Jenny. And now we are going to talk about finding the inverse using the inverse of operations. So let's start with now, inverse of operations, we all know from grade school that we have four basic operations. We've got adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing. So we know also that we have the inverse of those operations. So when we say subtract, the inverse of that one is add. And when we say add, the inverse of that is subtract. When we say multiply, the inverse of that one is divide. And vice versa. When we say divide, the inverse of that one is multiply. And moving up to the next level, we have to know that square root, when you say square root, the inverse of that one is squared. And when you say square, the inverse of that one is a square root. And when you say third power or raised to the power of 3, that is cube root. And of course, cube root is with the inverse of third power. So we will be needing those information in finding our inverse of a function. Now, let's get started with it. Let's start off with finding the inverse of f of x equal to x plus 2. Now, with the concept of inverse function, we can find inverse of operations, we can find the inverse of a function here for your f of x equal to x plus 2. Now, how to do it? We are going to know that when we do the inverse of your function here, we have the notation f to the power of -1 of x. So that is our notation. Now, once we have our given already, then we will be starting off by writing our x all the time. So this is the first step. You write your x in there after your notation. And then right after that one, we are to look at the next operation to that x in there. So we have a plus 2, and based on the inverse operation, adding, inverse of that one is subtracting. So we are to subtract it by 2. And there you go with your inverse. So I hope that's clear, everyone. Now we go on for another example. So let's have this one. So again, you can do it there. You can pause your video and come back to it and check whether your answer is correct. So anyway, we have here the inverse of your function f to the -1 of x. That will be equal to x. And then we do the inverse of +4. That will be -4. So there you go with the inverse of your operation. So let's move on to the next example. This is now f of x equal to x minus 3. And finding the inverse, we'll start off with the notation f to the -1 of x. That will be equal to x. We have a -3. Then we will have a plus 3. So there you go with the inverse of your function. Next, we move on to the next example. So again, you can try it out and pause the video and come back to the video once you're done. So we have here your inverse of your function f to the -1 of x, and that will be equal to x. We've got a -7, so we will do the inverse of that operation and do +7. So there you go with the inverse of your function. Now moving on to the next example, we have here f of x equal to 2x. Notice if you cannot see any operation in there, this is understood that we have multiplication. So doing the inverse of that, this is now f to the -1 of x. This is equal to x divided by 2. So there you go. Next, we go for 10 or f of x equal to 10x. So this is now f to the -1 of x. This is equal to x over 10. So there you go. And moving on, if we have division in here, then we can go for finding our inverse by doing the inverse of division, we have that one as multiplication. So we'll start off with x, and then we multiply our 6. So there you go with your inverse of your function. Next one, we have this one. So inverse of that is f to the negative 1 of x. That will be equal to, again, x. And then dividing 5, that is now multiplying 5. So there you go. So I hope you've learned something from me. And I will be making a video on the different patterns when you're looking for the inverse of a function. So stay updated. Kindly subscribe and like the video if you've liked it. Thank you and have a nice day.